Are you looking to break into the games industry? Are you an entry-level job hunter? If so, this one's for you. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show, Game Industry Job Hunt Podcast, Episode 7. Last week, in Episode 6, we heard a couple of really great personal stories from some listeners. And this week, I actually wanted to drill down into that concept a little bit. And so we're talking to my friend Conor Ross. Conor is an entry-level job hunter in the industry right now. We've all been there. Some of us are currently there trying to get your foot in the door and break in. And so I'm excited to kind of talk to Conor and get that entry-level perspective. Really quick before we do, make sure to visit GameIndustryJobHunt.com. We've got links, resources, show notes, all that good stuff. Social links. Follow the show on social, on LinkedIn specifically, and YouTube. Please make sure you go there, check those out, and leave us a great review, a stellar review, wherever you're listening to this show. With that out of the way, time to chat with Conor Ross. Conor Ross is an aspiring community manager, social media manager, and producer who is currently working hard to break into the video games industry by focusing on gaining experience through his YouTube channel and podcast. Conor, thanks for being here, man. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. So yeah, I was on your podcast. Speaking of your podcast, I was on as a guest, a couple of weeks ago. I think we recorded and the episode just came out. And I'm sure it's underperforming massively, but that's okay.
It's doing fine.
But yeah, no, the more we talked, the more we sort of realized there was sort of a crossover here. In our last show, we heard a couple of personal stories from listeners, and, I thought that it would be cool to sort of expand on that idea with you a little bit, because you are going through the job search just like many of us, but from that entry-level perspective, and we've talked about the entry-level thing a few times in passing on the show, but I thought it'd be really good to sort of drill down into that and sort of get a sense of what are entry-level job seekers kind of experiencing right now? What are you seeing? What are the challenges, the lessons, things like that? So yeah, to kind of kick it off, tell us a little bit about your background, why you're interested in working in games, and just kind of your general backstory.
Yeah, sure. So obviously my name is Conor. Joe introduced me. I've got a YouTube channel, the Conor Collection, where I interview people in the game industry. I've interviewed some people, as experienced as Joe, who's worked, in AAA for GameStop, and I also interview indie people. Currently, I'm a student at Virginia Tech. I'm majoring in communication, and I'll actually be graduating this May. So that's coming up really fast. I can't believe I'm this close, but
man, well, yeah, you're almost there, bud.
No, and it's actually funny because I'll look at somebody entering university now, and I'll be like, "That's 4 years. How can they do that?"
Yeah,
and I'm about to finish.
It's like an eternity ago. It's just so weird.
So I hadn't always known that I wanted to work in games. Actually, before university, when I was in high school, I graduated in 2020. The plan originally was actually to enter the military, but some personal things came up in my life, and I decided to go to college instead. I said, maybe college is better. And I went to a community college for 2 years, and I think we talked about this in my podcast, but originally what I wanted to do was work in kind of like local TV news, something like that.
Right, yeah.
But, as I kept going, and I got to tech, I transferred to tech from community college. I was like, I've always loved games. Like, I got to find something in games. And that's how I stumbled upon community management, social media management. Not last December, I guess it would be December 2023 now. I remember, what can I do? That was my thought. Like, what could I possibly do in games, and how can I get in games? So I really deep dived looking into, what a specialty in communication can do in games. And I found community management, social media management, and I just spent a lot of time specifically on LinkedIn reaching out to people who had those roles and, asking, how is this attainable for a student? What's the best thing I can do? And that's, a lot of them said, do something online, whether it's starting a YouTube channel or starting a Discord or do something that shows that you can either make content or build a community. I had talked to one guy I don't remember his name. It was on Reddit, actually. It's like the only guy I didn't talk to on LinkedIn who got into a community management position through making a guild in WoW that like blew up, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's just that. I mean, and I kind of stumbled into the interviews because I had a class in media writing where our first assignment was that we had to interview somebody and then write a paper on the assignment. Now, obviously, I'm not writing papers on each of the interviews that I do, but I found that I did like doing the interview. And at the time, I was trying to figure out, like, what can I do? And I was telling a friend of mine about it. I was like, well, I've got to make content, but I don't want to just do Let's Plays on YouTube. There's a million people that do that. And I just told him about the assignment that I had done, the interview, and he was like, why don't you just interview people? And it was like a light bulb appearing over my head like a cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
So,
why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, so that's how I started doing the interviews, and that was last spring, so it's almost been a year now that I've been doing the interviews.
Wow, yeah, I didn't even realize you've been doing it that long. That's great, man. In my opinion, and I've said this before here on the show, but you're doing the right thing. Like, you do the best way to kind of get started is the very first step is to start doing the thing. Whatever it is you want to be doing. If that's community management, then yeah, you have to create something to build that community around, or at least to start learning those community building fundamentals. And for me, it was a podcast. For me, it was a podcast, and I started my first podcast around that idea of, just learning to manage a community, like create a thing that warrants building a community around, like a podcast, and go with it. So yeah, if you had come to me at the very beginning, that would have been my advice. The same advice is just start doing something. And yeah, I think that's awesome. It really is the best way to sort of not only learn the basics, start sort of learning the basics, but it's also great when you come to the point where you are interviewing or you're talking to a company. I think that it's great to sort of be somebody that's already doing it, and you can say, I'm learning something new every day and it's going great, rather than being the person that is sort of like, well, I've never done this before, but I know that I could if you just give me a chance, that kind of thing. So being someone that's looking to get your foot in the door for the first time, like we said, what's your search been like so far, just in general?
I mean, lately it's just every day I've really been thinking about every possibility in my head, whereas if I can work in games, what's the best way to get in games? Okay, if I can't initially find a job in games, what can I do to make sure I get a salaried job and then eventually land in games? So, I mean, you look at a lot of the job listings for entry-level positions sometimes, and it's kind of a mixed bag. I've seen a couple where it's like 5 years of social media experience needed. It's either that or it's unpaid, or there's so many different things where it's like the entry level positions are so mixed. So I mean, I apply for whatever I can. A good buddy of mine from LinkedIn, Stefan Lenz, he helped me redo my resume to gear it towards community management and social media management. So I've really been trying to find, even if it's like 5 years of experience needed or 3 years of experience needed, even applying for that, just getting my name in the hat, getting my name in the ring. But it's getting to a point now where I'm just looking up recruiters, recruiters for game studios, and I'm just, hey, send them a message. Here's my resume. I understand that you may not have something open, but if you ever find anything open that you think I could fit in, please just take it and hold on to it. If not, no worries.
Yeah, for sure.
So just constantly reaching out to recruiters, constantly just applying for anything I can find. I've spent, some of these last couple of days, I'm in my winter break, but I'm taking winter class. Mm-hmm. So I'll do an assignment, read my book, my textbook for an hour, and then I'll spend the rest of the day just looking for people to send my resume to, or looking for new jobs I haven't applied to. And as much as I want a job in games, there's also the idea or the option where I can find something outside of that that's a lot, not easier, but a lot what's the word I'm looking for, or the phrase I'm looking for, where it's a lot, I guess it's easier to obtain a job outside of the games industry and see, maybe I can work in this a few years as long as it relates to what I'm doing, and then enter games 5 years from now, as long as I keep doing my interviews on the side or whatever. But it's hard because this is my break, and when school starts up again, I'm barely going to have the time to apply for
Yeah.
stuff. During the semester, I barely have the time to do the interviews, but I make time for them. So, I mean, just really being persistent with that. I've turned on LinkedIn. You can turn on notifications for specific roles. So I've got community manager, open. I've got social media. So every time something is posted, it pops up. But it's really just sending emails and kind of being persistent. I mean, I've probably sent emails to about like 25 recruiters now, and then I've probably applied for like 30, 40 jobs.
Yeah.
So it's a lot, but just got to keep doing it until something sticks, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And I think what you're doing again, we talk about networking all the time here on the show, and that's it. I mean, reaching out to those recruiters, introduce yourself. Just a week or two ago, we had that as a recommendation from somebody saying, reach out, introduce yourself. Hey, you may not have any roles that fit me right now, but here's my resume. If anything pops up that's X, Y, and Z, then let me know. I'd love to talk to you, and I think just making that contact is really valuable, because I'd be willing to bet that those callbacks happen more than we might realize. So I think the more of those intros that you can make for yourself and everything, that's probably really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, I've even had a couple, accept the message request and say like, hey, nothing's open now, but I'll definitely hold on to it. Yeah. And I appreciate you I appreciate you even sending it over. So, I mean, that's as good. I mean, to me, that's like I'm over the moon, because at least I was even recognized, you know.
That's always good.
So
that's always good. Just getting that response is amazing. And you kind of touched on something earlier that also made me think. One piece of advice that I would have for folks that are looking for entry level roles is really don't undercut the value of your transferable skills. I know that's kind of a buzzword that we hear a lot in the career world, your transferable skills, but it's really true. I mean, and especially in a role like community, where you really can get started without having done it before. There are lots of different options, lots of different ways to sort of get into it. Not that any of them are necessarily easier than another, but I think if you're doing the kinds of things you're doing, you're creating content, you have a podcast, a YouTube channel, these kinds of things, you're doing that sort of networking, there's a lot of value in the skills that you're practicing there that are going to help a lot with community, So again, just if you're an artist, what kinds of things have you done in the past that have helped you become a better artist, And that's experience.
You mentioned LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is, I think that at least, I'm still in college, so LinkedIn gets a kind of like finance bro or frat bro rep.
Yeah.
But it's actually been such a strong tool, and a huge asset. I started on LinkedIn like a year ago, and I've, just through networking with people, I got it. I started networking with people. Erin Goldsmith was a huge asset. She did those social Sundays.
Yeah, she's great.
That's how I met every single person that I've interviewed. So it's a lot easier, I think, to connect with people on LinkedIn than somebody that's really not on LinkedIn would think. A lot of people, they want to talk, they want to meet people. So it's a huge tool. I actually have a friend, right? I have a friend who I grew up with that he has his own YouTube channel. He makes like Valorant and CSGO gameplay. And I was like, well, dude, a lot of community managers that I've spoken to have gotten into the industry through specifically making content for one franchise or another. I've talked to so many community managers that are like, oh, I got this job at the industry just because I made videos on their game. Mm-hmm. I was like, you need to start on LinkedIn, because all the CSGO content you make and all the Valorant content you make, if you continue to grow and get big, there's a chance that you could perhaps, land a community manager contract. So I helped him out with that. So making a LinkedIn, just going out there, making a LinkedIn, making content, doing whatever, emailing people, as long as you're trying, I think that's what's most important, baby steps.
Absolutely. I would echo that. I mean, I got my first job in the industry just because I was really enthusiastic about the game, and I applied and they could see my passion, and that sort of, I said the other day on I think the last episode, I don't think what I do, or I don't think the way that I got into the industry would be doable anymore. just because it was, 10 years ago and it's a different industry and a different world now. But I do think that passion matters. And I do think that while passion and enthusiasm may not be enough to get you the job, it's still enough to help you stand out. And that might be more important these days. Just having any way to stand out that you possibly can is crucial. And if you're super passionate about a specific game or franchise or even company, that's some of the advice that I've heard from guests on the show is, making a list of the companies that you want to work for, even if that's 5 or 10 companies, and that it's weird because it's sort of like the snipe and spray approach of applying only for things that are a great fit for you and that you really, really want, and not just applying for anything that fits. It seems counterintuitive because it doesn't feel like you're taking advantage of the law of averages, right? Like the more things that I apply for, the more likely I am to get something. It seems like making a list of, I want to work at one of these 5 companies. It seems like that's not great advice. Like, well, yeah, but how long am I going to have to wait on that? But when you kind of think about it, it means that you're making your networking a lot easier. You're making your research and the things that you have to look for, the jobs you have to look out for, and the openings and things makes that a lot easier. Makes a lot of sense, really, to try that. So, if you're somebody like that creates a lot of Valorant content and that's something that you want to do, or another game, whatever the case may be, yeah, absolutely. Think about that as an angle, because you're gonna already be putting yourself out there, like we've talked about, like you're doing with your channel and your podcast, and that's really, I think, for a lot of people, the hardest part. The hardest part is sort of, making that decision to sort of put yourself out there, which really is incidentally, it's a great segue into my next question for you. The focus that you're putting on creating content and just kind of getting your voice out there, which I think is a great play. Was it tough for you to sort of decide to take that step and kind of put yourself out there, especially at this early stage in your career? Like you can see a lot of people, I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've got a lot to say, and that's great. But when you're trying to break in and you're trying to create a thing, and again, as someone who has done the exact thing you're doing, what was that like for you, sort of coming to terms with that decision of, okay, I'm going to put myself out there and this might be kind of scary, but I'm going to do it. And I think there's value in me doing that. Like, what was that decision like for you?
I mean, at the time, it wasn't very hard. I spoke earlier about the media writing interview that I did. So I really happened to have liked the interview, and I knew at the time that I had to make some sort of content. I've been told by you, I've been told by plenty of other people, like you have to make content. So I was really trying to figure out what. I figured out that I liked doing the interviews, and I also had a class at the time, visual media, and one of the assignments was that we had to go and film a video for the class. And so just between that and the interview, I was like, I'm just going to interview people. And at first it was really hard. I reached out to about 20 or 30 people, and finally Nick Ravel from Digital Scorpion Interactive let me interview him, and he was really nice. And it kind of segued from there. I mean, there's like a couple problems initially that popped up really early on. And the first one was that I want to work in games so much that, to me, people that work in games are like celebrities, if that makes sense, regardless of
totally.
experience or just the fact that somebody's out there trying to make a game. So a lot of it at first was, and we spoke about this in my own podcast, a lot of this was like, okay, so like, why do you like making games? Or just very shy and very, I guess small. So it was really hard getting past that. But once I did, we talked. My listening skills got a little bit better, and I started doing follow-up questions and everything. So it was really just trying to get past feeling small at first, or that lack of confidence, and building up the confidence over time. And it wasn't like a lack of confidence in myself. More so, it felt like I was in somebody's shadow. But that's a weird way to put it, I guess. Not like it's a bad thing.
Yeah,
but like,
I know what you mean. I wonder too, do you feel like, I know a lot of people in the industry suffer from imposter syndrome, and I don't know if that's something that affects you at all, but if it is, do you think that's something that you sort of thought like, I don't know why I'm, should I be doing this? Should I be interviewing this guy? Like, he's doing all these things and I'm nobody. Like, what am I doing here? Like, did something like that kind of ever enter your brain or not really?
No, I mean, most of the time it's like, like you, for example, right? When I got you, I went to my fiance. I was like, "Look at this fucking guy." Sorry, I don't know if I can curse. I was like, "Look at this guy. He's worked at Gearbox. Are you kidding me?"
Oh
He
my
just
God.
said yes to me, and I was like, "This is gonna be huge." And it's a lot of stuff like that. So it's never like, "Oh, I shouldn't deserve to interview
Yeah.
this person." It's more so, okay, if I'm gonna interview this person, I gotta speak up and I gotta do good questions.
Yeah.
Most of the time, after I interview somebody, I'll post clips on Instagram. And I used to do TikTok, but looks like it's rest in peace TikTok.
We'll see.
But
We'll see.
We'll see. So when I started doing that, that was around 10, 11 interviews in, and I went back to some of my original interviews, and I was so shy. The questions were so bad. I was like, I can't even post this.
It's hard. It's really hard to go back and listen, especially with something like podcasting, because you're right. The more you do it, the better you get at it, and asking questions and being able to follow up and kind of knowing, how to guide the conversation or even when to guide it and things like that. And yeah, you get better as you do it, but then you go back and listen to the first things that you did and you just cringe. You're like, oh, this is so bad. Oh, what was I thinking? But yeah, I mean, I asked that because that's something that, imposter syndrome for me, I think is something that I hear a lot of people suffering with, especially in the games industry. And, maybe that's kind of part of it is that because I felt a similar way, as far as like, people that were already in the industry and I was trying to get in, and I sort of put them on a pedestal to a degree. And when I finally got into the industry, again, like I had no experience. I had just sort of, I faked it till I made it kind of in a way, and knowing that I was capable of doing the job that I wanted to do, of course, but you have to start somewhere. And that's kind of just, I started where I could and just sort of made it up as I went along. And so the fact that it kind of worked out was weird for me in a way. And so I had a couple of months when I first started at Gearbox and in the office with the team where there was a lot of sort of fanboying out, just walking through the halls and kind of seeing, taking it all in and just kind of thinking, oh man, like I'm here. How did this happen? This is so weird. And then after a couple of months, I kind of said to myself, okay, like whatever, dude, you're here. It's fine. Just do the work and whatever, and so that subsided a lot, but it was still a long time before I was able to kind of get a handle on the imposter syndrome part of it.
I think the closest thing I've had to that was, I actually ended up over the summer working with DSI a little bit, which is an indie studio, and one of the senior leadership members over there, or senior team members, is Jerry Voorhees, and Jerry worked on Halo Infinite. He worked for 343 for a couple of years, and he worked on Halo Infinite. And I'm a huge Halo fan, and so when I did the interview and whenever I talked to him, it was like I shouldn't even be talking to this guy.
Yeah.
He's like so much cooler than me because he worked on a game that I liked. And I guess that's the closest thing I've had to it. But when I've interviewed people, I think that the initial like, oh my God, this guy works for Gearbox or this guy worked for so-and-so kind of subsides before the interview. And now it's like, okay, I need to do a good job. Yeah. Now, obviously, if, I'm a huge fan of Halo. I'm a huge fan of The Last of Us. I'm a huge fan of, the Spider-Man games. So if Halo Studios or Insomniac or Naughty Dog hired me right off the bat or something, which is like 99.9% not going to happen. But if it did, I'd be ecstatic. And I'm sure that I'd have that same feeling walking through those halls. But at the moment, it's a lot of just, I need to get a job and I'm going to try to do this. My friends, I was born later in September, so I was born in this weird period where my parents had to choose to put me in later in public school or earlier, and they chose to put me in later, so I was already nearly a year older than everybody in my class. Well, then we go through that, and then I did my 2 years at a community college, but before I transferred to tech, I took a gap year to save money, right? So now I'm nearly 2 years older than a lot of the people that I'm in classes with, which isn't like an issue. It's not that I can't like communicate with them or connect with them, but now my friends who I did go to high school with are all graduated and building up careers in industries that they're working in. And I've never been a super patient person, which has been a challenge
I get
with
that.
my YouTube channel, where it's like, oh, I'll be checking a video as soon as I post it, be like, oh, well, that's only gotten this many
Where are
views.
the
And
views?
yeah. So I've never been a huge, like I've never been a super patient person, but that's something I've been having to get. And with this last semester of college, I'm ready to be done, not because I dislike college, but because I want to have a cool job too,
Yeah,
like,
you're raring to go. Yeah.
I'm raring to go.
Do you sort of view that lack of patience as kind of a superpower in a way, as far as taking that initiative, using that impatience as motivation, those kinds of things, or?
I think it can be a double-edged sword, I guess. That lack of patience, I think it's what drives me to keep interviewing people or keep posting the videos. But it also sometimes can make me overthink things and make decisions where I should have spent, some time thinking about it and just go, no, I'm going to do this instead. It's never like brought me down to a degree, but it's definitely something that I think needs to be worked on. And nobody's ever like perfect with patience, I think. So I think it's something that everybody could work on, but me maybe a little bit more so than others, especially with the YouTube channel, because sometimes it's like, oh, well, are the interviews doing good enough? Should I keep doing the interviews, or should I also do this instead? Like, I know that a lot of people, like we had mentioned earlier, focus on one particular title, and I was like, oh, well, should I do the interviews and focus on one game, or should I just do this? So it's a lot of second guessing, and I feel like I've just got to go sometimes. So I guess, yeah, it could be a superpower. I mean, it led me to interviewing people like you, like Nick, Jonathan, who I'm working with now. A lot of cool people, but sometimes I think I overthink because of it.
Yeah, I just asked because I think that impatience, it occurs to me as kind of a funny word in this context of job hunting and everything that we're talking about here, as far as standing out and creating content and stuff, because there's a drive there that I think impatience can give you, that makes you sort of say, you know what, yeah, I'm just going to do this thing, and I'm going to start learning it as I go, and then which is essentially what you've done. I'm going to do this YouTube channel, I'm going to do this podcast, I'm going to figure this out as I go, and then search for the job while I'm doing the thing, because that's, maybe it's like, in your mind, it's like, oh, it's faster that way, or, it's more entertaining that way. It's not as boring, that kind of thing. So I think I can see where it's sort of like an impatient side, it could be a good thing in terms of being driven and motivated and things like that, which again could make you stand out. I think that later feeds into, because of that impatience, you started creating content and doing these things, and then that drove you and motivated you to reach out to the most recruiters and apply to the most things. You just never know. You never know how these kinds of things that we sort of view as, imperfections and downsides. I've found that usually for me, it's ADHD. I mean, I bleed ADHD out of my ears, but I've found ways over the years to harness it in certain ways and at certain times to kind of make it a superpower in a way, and so you talking about your impatience kind of strikes me the same way, that there's, saying it's a double-edged sword, I think is a really apt way to put it.
Yeah, a double-sided sword, I guess.
Yeah.
Is what I should have said, not double-edged.
Well, I mean,
same thing.
Yeah, tomato. I don't know. What am I, a sword expert here? I don't know. I don't know anything about swords, man. The last kind of just question, like written out question that I have for you that I kind of wanted to get your take on was, from that entry level job hunter perspective, what's the most valuable lesson that you've learned so far that's really kind of helped you in your search, you think?
I mean, I guess the biggest thing would be persistent. I could easily like apply for one job and then go like, all right, that's enough, and then go kick back and lay on the couch. But the world's not gonna stop for me. Like, if I don't get that job, I'm not gonna get handed a job. So it's really just applying. I was the other day, I was with some friends. I was with friends and I was emailing recruiters. We were watching some like reality show or something, and everybody was doing their own thing. But it got to a point where I'd emailed so many recruiters that I was getting sick of emails, because each time, it's not, you don't want to just be like, hey, my name's Conor, I make YouTube videos, these are my 3 internships I've done, please hire me. It's not just about that, it's about, like, I got to go on their LinkedIn, I got to go look at what they've done, I've got to maybe what area they live in, find a way to connect with them in some way to open up and
do the
and
intel,
be like,
get the intel.
Yeah. And be like, hey, like, oh, I noticed that you're from Virginia Beach. I'm from Virginia Beach. What high school did you go to? I went to this high school. Anyways, and try to find a way to segue. Be persistent. Nothing's holding you back from being persistent but you. And then, that's coming from like a super impatient guy.
Yeah, as we've addressed.
Yeah.
I saw some data the other day, and to your point about just, being persistent, reaching out to people as much as possible. I saw some data the other day that was some high percentage, like 70-something% of jobs that were filled in some space of time were filled through referrals or through, like the candidate knew someone at the company that was able to sort of get them in and help them get rolling with the interview process or meeting people or whatever. So that's the kind of thing you're kind of looking for, right? You're kind of working toward is getting to the point where you're building enough relationships where when things pop up, you can sort of say, oh, who do I know there? Or who do I know that might know someone there? And really, really kind of work that network for all it's worth. And I mean, persistence and just using your time as best you can is obviously an amazing way to do that. Well, listen, so as we wrap things up here, I want to make sure to give you a chance to plug your show. Tell us where we can find it, where people can connect with you, all of that good stuff.
Yeah. So my show, it's the Conor Collection. It's on YouTube. Just as we mentioned earlier, mostly interviews. I've interviewed people like Joe. Obviously, we've talked about it. So Joe, I've interviewed. I'm trying to think of my most recent interviews. Fahim Siddiqui of Studio Cloud Gray. I've interviewed Ben Qualo of Midwest Games. Plenty of indie people. Renee Gittins is another big one. So just people from all over. You can find that on YouTube. I've also got an Instagram. On LinkedIn, you can find me, Conor Ross, Conor. A lot of people type 2 N's or NNER, just CONOR, Conor Ross.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, listen, hey, buddy, thank you again for being on. I really enjoyed it. We'll keep an eye on your search and obviously stay in touch, me and you, and keep me posted on everything. But yeah, man, thanks again. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Talk to you soon, man.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the show. Once again, big thanks to my guest, Conor Ross. Make sure to check out his podcast and YouTube channel, The Conor Collection. Thank you also for listening. Really appreciate it. Make sure to leave us a good review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to the show. We would really appreciate that. It helps us spread the good word, and that's definitely what we want to do. We want to grow this community. So with your help, we can do that. Let's see, above and beyond that, follow the show on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube, I guess I should say. And check out GameIndustryJobHunt.com for show notes and links and resources. And with that, keep pushing, and we'll talk to you soon.